The first shot of the revolver sent dust flying as Darla Gardner sprinted across the auction yard, her heart pounding in her throat, her worn boots catching on the uneven ground of Miles City, Montana. It was 1876, and she'd be damned if she was going to be sold like livestock to the highest bidder. Her golden brown hair had come loose from its pins, streaming behind her as another warning shot cracked through the air. "Stop that woman!" bellowed the auctioneer, his voice carrying across the crowded yard, where men had gathered to bid on everything from cattle to land deeds to, as of this morning, unmarried women desperate enough to agree to matrimonial auctions. But Darla hadn't agreed to anything. She'd been drugged, kidnapped, and transported 3 states away from her home in Illinois after rejecting the advances of a wealthy businessman who wouldn't take no for an answer. She reached the wooden fence at the far end of the yard, her fingers clawing at the rough planks. It was too tall to climb quickly, especially in her threadbare dress. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, boots pounding dirt, angry voices shouting. Desperation surged through her as she frantically searched for an opening, any weakness in the barrier. From the other side of the fence, a deep voice cut through her panic. "Stand back, miss!" Darla stumbled backward just as the fence splintered inward, 3 planks giving way under the force of something massive hitting them from the outside. A moment later, a large chestnut horse pushed through the newly created gap, and atop it sat a man in a worn leather vest and dusty hat. His face was partially shadowed, but his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that momentarily froze her in place. "Take my hand," he said, extending his arm toward her. "Now or never." Darla hesitated only a fraction of a second before reaching up. His grip was strong, calloused, and in one smooth motion, he pulled her up behind him on the horse. "Hold tight," he instructed, and she barely had time to wrap her arms around his waist before the horse bolted forward, surging through the broken fence and away from the auction yard. Shouts and more gunfire echoed behind them, but the powerful horse carried them swiftly through the back streets of Miles City, hooves thundering against the hard-packed earth. Darla clung to the stranger, her face pressed against his back, the scent of leather, horse, and the faintest hint of tobacco filling her senses. "I'm Adam," he called over his shoulder as they rode. "Adam Steele." "Darla Gardner?" she replied, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Why did you help me?" But Adam didn't answer, focusing instead on navigating his horse through a narrow passage between 2 buildings. They emerged onto a wider trail that led away from town, toward the rolling plains and distant mountains. Only when the sounds of pursuit had faded completely did he slow their pace. "Nobody should be sold like property," he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not cattle, not horses, and certainly not people." Darla's arms were still wrapped tightly around his middle, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Thank you," she whispered, the full weight of what had just happened beginning to settle on her shoulders. She had escaped, yes, but to what? She was miles from home, without money or connections, in a territory she barely knew. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "Somewhere safe," Adam replied. "I've got a cabin about 3 hours' ride from here. You can stay until we figure out what to do next." The mention of "we" struck Darla. This stranger had already done more for her than she could have hoped for, yet he spoke as if her problems were now somehow shared. "You don't have to do more," she said. "You've risked enough already." Adam turned slightly in the saddle, and for the first time, Darla got a clear look at his face. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, his features were too weathered for that. With a scar running along his jawline and the beginnings of crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, but there was something magnetic about him nonetheless. His eyes were a clear blue-green, like the mountain lakes she'd seen in paintings. "Those men back there," he said seriously. "They'll be looking for you, and they'll be looking for me too now. We're in this together, at least for a while." The prairie stretched before them, an ocean of grass swaying in the afternoon breeze. The Montana sky seemed impossibly vast, and Darla felt both terrified and strangely free. Freedom had come at the hands of this mysterious cowboy, and as they rode further from town, she wondered what kind of man would risk everything for a woman he'd never met. The rhythmic motion of the horse eventually lulled Darla into an exhausted daze. The trauma of her kidnapping, the terror of nearly being auctioned, and the rush of escape had drained her completely. Without meaning to, she found herself leaning more heavily against Adam's back, her grip around his waist loosening as fatigue overtook her. "Whoa," Adam said softly, bringing the horse to a gentle stop. "You're about to fall off. Let's rest a bit." He dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help her down. Darla's legs trembled as they touched ground, and Adam's strong hand steadied her by the waist. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness but grateful for his support. Adam led her to a small stream nearby, where the horse could drink while they rested in the shade of a lone cottonwood tree. From his saddlebag, he produced a canteen and some jerky, offering both to her first. "You're not from around here," he observed as she drank deeply from the canteen. Darla wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, suddenly aware of how uncivilized she must appear. "Illinois?" she said. "I was teaching at a small school in Springfield when—" Her voice faltered. "When what?" Adam asked, his eyes narrowing with concern. Darla took a deep breath. "When the son of the school board chairman decided he wanted me for his wife. I refused his advances, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. One night, men broke into my boarding house. They put something over my face, and when I woke up, I was in a wagon heading west with other women." Her hands trembled at the memory. Some had agreed to be mail-order brides. Others, like me, had been taken. Adam's jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek. "These men have names? The one who wanted me is Harrison Dawes. His father practically owned Springfield." She looked down at her hands. "The men who took me, I don't know. But the auctioneer called himself Parnell." Adam nodded, filing away the information. "Parnell's been running operations like that for years. Territories too big, laws too sparse to stop him." He paused. "Unless someone decides to take matters into their own hands." There was something in his tone that made Darla look at him more carefully. "Is that what you do, Mr. Steele? Take matters into your own hands?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sometimes. And it's just Adam." They continued their journey as the afternoon stretched toward evening. The vast Montana landscape unfolded before them, rolling hills giving way to steeper terrain as they approached the foothills of distant mountains. Darla found herself taking deep breaths of the clean, open air, so different from the sooty atmosphere of Springfield. "Almost there," Adam said, after they had been riding for nearly 3 hours. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. They crested a small ridge, and below them nestled a tidy log cabin with a corral for horses and what appeared to be a small garden. Smoke rose lazily from the stone chimney. "Someone's there," Darla said, tension immediately returning to her body. "My partner, Daniel," Adam explained. "Don't worry, he's a good man. Fought alongside me in the war." As they approached the cabin, a tall, busty, broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard emerged from the door, a rifle held casually in one hand. Upon seeing Adam, he relaxed, lowering the weapon. "You're back early," Daniel called, then noticed Darla. "And with company." Adam dismounted, then helped Darla down. "This is Miss Darla Gardner. She needs our help." He turned to Darla. "Daniel Williams, best shot in 3 territories and makes a passable stew." Daniel's weathered face creased in a smile. "Don't believe him about the stew, miss. It's excellent." He extended a hand to her, which she took hesitantly. "Any friend of Adam's is welcome here." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with chairs, and a few shelves lined with books, which surprised Darla. A curtain separated what appeared to be sleeping quarters at the back. "You can take my bunk," Adam said, nodding toward the curtained area. "Daniel and I will sleep out here." "I couldn't possibly," Darla began to protest. "You could and you will," Daniel interrupted gently. "No arguments. Now you must be starving." As they ate Daniel's surprisingly delicious venison stew, Adam recounted the day's events. Daniel listened gravely, asking a few pointed questions about Parnell and the men at the auction. "You broke the fence?" Daniel asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Subtle as always, Adam." Adam shrugged. "Didn't have time for subtlety." "What will happen now?" Darla asked, setting down her spoon. "Those men will be looking for me, for us." The two men exchanged a look that Darla couldn't quite interpret. They might, Adam acknowledged, but they've got other things to worry about. Parnell's operation isn't exactly legal, even in these parts. The territorial governor's been trying to shut him down for months. You know a lot about this, Darla observed. Daniel let out a short laugh. Adam knows a lot about most things happening in Montana territory. He stood, collecting the empty bowls. Get some rest, Miss Gardner. You're safe here. Darla did sleep, better than she would have expected, exhaustion overriding her anxiety. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of low voices. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the unfamiliar ceiling, the rough blanket, the distant mountains visible through the small window, but then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She rose, smoothing her crumpled dress as best she could, and attempting to tidy her hair with her fingers. Behind the curtain, she found a basin of water had been left for her, along with a clean towel and, to her surprise, a simple cotton shirt and trousers that looked as though they might fit her reasonably well. After washing and changing into the offered clothes, she emerged to find Adam alone at the table, a mug of coffee in front of him, and a map spread out before him. "Morning," he said, looking up. His eyes registered the clothes she wore, clearly meant for a youth rather than a grown woman, but he made no comment about them. "Coffee?" "Please," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Where's Daniel?" "Gone to check on some things in town." Adam poured her coffee into a tin mug. "He'll be back by nightfall." "These clothes," Darla began. "Belong to Daniel's son," Adam said. "Thought they might fit you better than what you had." "His son?" A shadow crossed Adam's face. "Died in 71. Cholera." He cleared his throat. "Your dress is hanging outside. Should be dry by midday." Darla wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I'm sorry about Daniel's son." Adam nodded, his eyes returning to the map. "We all carry losses out here." She wanted to ask what losses he carried, but something in his manner discouraged the question. Instead, she leaned forward to look at the map. "What are you planning?" "Trying to figure out the safest way to get you home, if that's what you want." The question caught her off guard. Did she want to return to Illinois? There was nothing left for her there. Her parents were long dead, her teaching position surely filled by now. And the threat of Harrison Dawes remained. I don't know if I can go back," she admitted. Adam looked up, studying her face. "Then what do you want, Darla Gardner?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her heart beat a little faster. "To be free," she said simply. "To make my own choices." A small smile lifted one corner of his mouth. "That's something I understand." He traced a line on the map with his finger. "In the meantime, we need to make sure Parnell and his men don't find you." "Who are you, really?" Darla asked abruptly. "Why would you risk yourself for me? Why do you know so much about Parnell?" Adam sat back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. After a moment, he reached inside his shirt and pulled out a silver badge. "U.S. Marshal," he said quietly. "I've been tracking Parnell's operation for months. Daniel, too. He's my deputy." Darla stared at the badge, then at Adam. "So, yesterday at the auction yard, I was there to gather evidence, maybe make some arrests if the opportunity arose. Wasn't planning on a jailbreak," he said with a wry smile. "But when I saw you running, saw how determined you were to escape." He shrugged. "Plans changed." "You could lose your position for that," Darla said, understanding dawning. "Maybe, but I've never been good at standing by while someone suffers." He tucked the badge away. "Besides, you're a witness now. Your testimony could help bring down Parnell's entire operation." The day passed quietly. Adam showed Darla around the property, the small garden where they grew vegetables, the corral where 3 horses now grazed, including the chestnut that had carried them to safety. He introduced her to each animal by name: Cutter, the chestnut; Smoke, a dappled gray; and Penny, a small bay mare. "She's gentle," Adam said, as Penny nuzzled Darla's hand. "Good for someone who doesn't ride much." "Are you suggesting I learn?" Darla asked, stroking the mare's soft nose. "Out here, it's freedom," he replied simply. That afternoon, Adam gave her first riding lesson. He was a patient teacher, explaining each step carefully and staying close as she tentatively guided Penny around the corral. His hands were steady as they adjusted her posture or demonstrated how to hold the reins properly. "You're a natural," he said, as she completed her third circle without incident. Darla laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she had truly laughed? "I think Penny deserves most of the credit." Adam was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It suits you," he said quietly. "What does?" "Laughter, freedom." He looked away quickly, busying himself with adjusting Penny's saddle. "You hungry? Should start dinner before Daniel gets back." As the sun began to set, they worked together preparing a simple meal. Adam wasn't as skilled a cook as Daniel, but he knew his way around the cast iron stove. Darla chopped vegetables while he prepared a rabbit he'd trapped earlier. "Did you always want to be a marshal?" she asked as they worked. Adam considered the question. "No, wanted to be a rancher actually. Still do, someday." He glanced at her. "What about you? Always want to be a teacher?" "I wanted to be a writer," she admitted. "Still do. Someday." She mimicked his phrasing with a small smile. "What would you write about?" "Everything. The world as it is, the world as it could be." She hesitated. "People like you." Adam raised an eyebrow. "People like me?" "People who do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs them." Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. Adam looked as though he might say something more, but the moment was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. "Daniel's back," Adam said, moving to the window. His posture immediately tensed. "Get down," he ordered, his voice suddenly hard. "What is it?" Darla asked, fear clutching at her throat. "Not Daniel. 3 riders, armed." Adam moved swiftly to the fireplace, retrieving his rifle from where it rested against the stone. "Get behind the curtain. If anything happens to me, there's a trap door under the rug. It leads to a root cellar and a tunnel that comes out by the creek." Darla's heart pounded as she crouched behind the curtain, peering through a small gap. Adam stood by the window, rifle ready, his entire demeanor transformed from the patient teacher of earlier to a dangerous predator ready to defend his territory. The riders stopped outside, and a voice called out, "Steele, we know you're in there. Send out the woman, and maybe we can work something out." "Parnell's men?" Adam muttered, positioning himself beside the door. "We paid good money for that merchandise, Marshal," the voice continued. "You had no right to interfere in a legitimate business transaction." "There's nothing legitimate about selling human beings," Adam called back. "Ride away now, and I won't have to arrest you, or worse." A harsh laugh answered him. "You're outnumbered, Steele, and our boss wants his property back. That woman cost him a lot of trouble to acquire." Darla's blood ran cold. They weren't just Parnell's men, they were working for Harrison Dawes. He had followed her all the way to Montana territory. "Last warning," Adam shouted. "Leave now." Instead of a reply, a shot rang out, shattering the window. Adam ducked, then returned fire. The next few minutes were chaos bullets splintering wood, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the cabin, Adam moving with practiced efficiency as he defended their position. Then silence fell, broken only by the sound of retreating hoofbeats and a low groan from Adam. "Adam!" Darla called, emerging from behind the curtain. Her heart stopped when she saw him slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "I'm all right," he said through gritted teeth. "Just grazed me." But as Darla rushed to his side, she could see it was more than a graze. The bullet had torn through his side, not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough. "Tell me what to do," she said, forcing calm into her voice. Adam's eyes, clouded with pain but still alert, met hers. "In the trunk by the bed, medical supplies. Need to clean and bandage it." Darla worked quickly, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt, cleaning the wound with whiskey from a bottle he directed her to, and bandaging it tightly with strips of clean cloth. Her hands were steady, her mind focused, even as fear for him threatened to overwhelm her. "You're good at this," Adam commented weakly as she tied off the bandage. "I had to tend to the younger children at school sometimes," she replied. "Scraped knees mostly. Nothing like this." "They'll be back," Adam said, attempting to sit up straighter. "With more men." "You need to rest," Darla insisted, placing a hand on his shoulder. He covered her hand with his own. Daniel should have been back by now. Something's wrong. The realization struck them both at the same time. Daniel might have been intercepted on his way back from town. "We need to leave," Adam said, struggling to his feet despite Darla's protests. "Get to the horses." "You can't ride in this condition," she argued. "Have to." His face was pale, but determination burned in his eyes. "They know where we are now. It's not safe." Despite her objections, Adam insisted they pack quickly food, ammunition, medical supplies, bedrolls. Every movement clearly cost him pain, but he refused to slow down. "Where will we go?" Darla asked as she helped him saddle Cutter. "I know a place," he replied. "An old line shack about 15 miles north of here. No one's used it for years." Night had fallen completely by the time they rode out. Adam on Cutter and Darla on Penny. The moon was just a sliver, providing barely enough light to see the path ahead. They rode in silence, Adam occasionally swaying in the saddle, but refusing to stop. After what seemed like hours, they reached a small, dilapidated cabin nestled in a grove of pines. It was barely more than a single room with a rusted stove and a sagging cot. But it was shelter. Darla helped Adam inside, alarmed by how heavily he leaned on her. His bandage was soaked through with fresh blood, and his skin burned with the beginnings of fever. "Need to lie down?" he mumbled as she guided him to the cot. Darla worked quickly to build a fire in the stove, boil water, and change Adam's bandages. His wound looked angry and inflamed, and she feared infection had already set in. "Adam," she said, placing a cool cloth on his forehead, "I need to know what to do if you can't." His feverish eyes found hers. "You'll be all right," he said with surprising clarity. "You're stronger than you know, Darla Gardner." She shook her head, tears threatening. "I'm not. I'm scared, and I can't lose you." The words slipped out before she could stop them, raw and honest. In the few days she'd known him, this man had become her protector, her teacher, her friend, and perhaps something more. Adam's hand reached up to touch her cheek. "Not going anywhere," he promised, his voice barely above a whisper. "Still have to show you how to track deer." Darla caught his hand and pressed it to her lips. "Then you'd better get well quickly, Marshal Steele." As the night deepened, Adam's fever worsened. Darla did everything she could keeping his wound clean, applying cool cloths to his forehead, forcing him to drink water when he was conscious enough to swallow. She talked to him constantly, telling him about her life in Illinois, her dreams of writing, the places she'd read about but never seen. "I'd like to see the ocean someday," she said as she re-wet the cloth for his forehead. "To stand on the shore and look out at all that water stretching forever." "Pacific coast," Adam murmured. His eyes closed. "Most beautiful sunset you'll ever see." "You've been there?" Darla asked, surprised. "Before the war. Worked a cattle drive to San Francisco." A small smile touched his lips. "Stood on the beach and thought I'd reached the end of the world." "Tell me about it," she urged, relieved that he was lucid enough to speak. Adam's descriptions of the Pacific coast, though interrupted by bouts of fever, painted vivid pictures that transported them both far from the tiny cabin and their precarious situation. Darla held on to every word, as much to keep him talking as to hear the stories themselves. Sometime in the darkest hours of the night, Adam's fever broke. Darla, who had been dozing in a sitting position beside the cot, woke to find him watching her, his eyes clearer than they had been in hours. "You stayed," he said simply. "Of course I stayed," she replied, touching his forehead. It was cooler, the fever finally receding. "You could have run," he pointed out. "Taken Penny and headed for the nearest town. Would have been safer." Darla looked at him steadily. "I don't run from the things that matter, Adam Steele." The next morning brought both improvement and new worries. Adam was stronger, able to sit up and take broth, but they were running low on supplies. More concerning was the question of what had happened to Daniel. "I need to find him," Adam said, attempting to stand. Darla pushed him gently back onto the cot. "You're in no condition to go anywhere. I'll go." "Absolutely not," Adam protested. "It's too dangerous." "You taught me to ride," she reminded him. "I can follow the trail back toward town, see if there's any sign of him." Their argument was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders by the sound of it. Adam reached for his gun, but Darla was already at the window, peering cautiously through a crack in the shutters. "It's Daniel!" she breathed in relief. "And he's not alone." Daniel rode at the head of a group of 6 men, all wearing badges similar to Adam's. When they dismounted, Darla rushed outside to meet them. "He's inside," she told Daniel. "Shot, but the fever's broken." Daniel's weathered face showed relief. "Thank God. We've been searching since yesterday." He gestured to the men behind him. "U.S. Marshals from Helena. We've been busy." Inside, Daniel knelt beside Adam's cot. The reunion between the partners brief but heartfelt. "Thought I lost you this time," Daniel said gruffly. "Takes more than a bullet to get rid of me," Adam replied with a weak grin. "What happened?" Daniel's expression hardened. "Parnell's operation is finished. We arrested him and most of his men yesterday in town. Found evidence linking him to kidnappings across 3 territories." He glanced at Darla. "Including yours, Miss Gardner." "What about the men who attacked the cabin?" Adam asked. 3 of them got away," Daniel admitted. "But we know who they are. They won't get far." One of the other marshals stepped forward. "They were working for someone named Harrison Dawes," he said. "Ring any bells, madam?" Darla felt her blood run cold at the name. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's the man who had me kidnapped from Illinois." The marshal nodded. "We found telegrams between him and Parnell. He paid a hefty sum to have you brought west for that auction." "Is he here, in Montana?" Darla asked, fear evident in her voice. "No, madam. Still in Illinois, as far as we know. But we've wired the authorities there with the evidence. He'll be facing kidnapping charges, among other things." The relief that washed over her was so powerful that Darla had to sit down. After months of terror and uncertainty, the nightmare was finally ending. The next few days passed in a blur of recovery and decisions. Adam's wound healed clean, thanks to Darla's careful nursing, and they returned to Adam and Daniel's cabin, which showed the scars of the gunfight but was still structurally sound. As Adam regained his strength, Darla found herself facing a choice. The marshals had offered to arrange transportation back to Illinois, where she could testify against Harrison Dawes if needed. Her teaching position might even be restored now that Dawes and his father would likely face disgrace. But something held her back, or rather, someone. On a warm evening a week after the shootout, Darla sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in breathtaking colors. Adam joined her, moving more easily now, but still favoring his injured side. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, lowering himself carefully beside her on the bench. "It is," she agreed. "Different from Illinois sunsets, bigger somehow." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the air between them charged with unspoken questions. "I heard you talking with Chief Marshal Bennett," Adam finally said, "about going back east." Darla nodded. "He says they can arrange passage on the eastbound train next week. Is that what you want?" Adam's voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes, when she turned to meet them, were anything but. "I've been asking myself that," she admitted. "What's waiting for me in Illinois? A school that replaced me, a town that let me be taken." "And what's here?" Adam asked softly. Darla took a deep breath. "Freedom. Mountains I've never climbed, rivers I've never crossed." She paused, gathering her courage. "A man who broke a fence to save me." Adam's hand found hers on the bench between them, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I'm not much," he said. "A marshal with a patched-up cabin and too many enemies." "You're everything," Darla whispered, and the truth of it resonated in her chest. This man, who had risked his life for a stranger, who had shown her what freedom truly meant, had somehow become the center of her world in the space of a week. Adam turned to face her fully. "If you stay," he said, "I can't promise it will be easy. Montana territory isn't kind to the unprepared." "Then prepare me," Darla replied. "Teach me to ride better, to shoot straight, to survive out here." She squeezed his hand. "I'm a quick study, Marshal Steele." A slow smile spread across Adam's face, transforming it. "That you are, Miss Gardner." He leaned closer, his free hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. "There's one more thing I should tell you before you decide." "What's that?" "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. Have been since I saw you running across that auction yard, refusing to be anyone's property." Darla's heart soared at his words. "And I've been falling for you since you broke through that fence and offered me your hand." Their first kiss was gentle, tender, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, the last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky, the first stars beginning to appear. "Stay," Adam whispered against her lips. "Stay and build something with me." "Yes," Darla replied without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." 3 years later, Darla Steele stood on the porch of a much larger cabin, watching her husband return from checking the fence line of their small ranch. Beside her, 2-year-old Elizabeth played with wooden blocks carved by her Uncle Daniel, who now served as the territorial marshal, while Adam focused on building their home and herd. The auction yard where they had first met was long gone, Parnell serving time in a federal prison. Harrison Dawes had been convicted of kidnapping and was serving a similar sentence in Illinois. The nightmares that had once plagued Darla's sleep had faded, replaced by dreams of the future, a future that stretched as wide and promising as the Montana sky. As Adam dismounted and swept their daughter into his arms, his eyes found Darla's across the yard, still filled with the same intensity and tenderness that had been there when he'd first reached for her through the broken fence. "How are my girls today?" he called, carrying Elizabeth toward the porch. "Waiting for you," Darla replied with a smile. "Always waiting for you." Adam climbed the steps and kissed her, their daughter squirming happily between them. "Never have to wait long," he promised. "Not ever again." Darla leaned into his embrace, breathing in the scent of him, leather, horse, and home. From desperate escape to lasting love, their journey had been unexpected, dangerous, and beautiful. The auction yard had tried to put a price on her, but Adam Steele had shown her that freedom was priceless, and love even more so. As the sun set on another day in the territory they both now called home, Darla silently thanked that broken fence and the brave cowboy who had led her through to a life she could never have imagined.